then laying the groundwork for those watching who would be influenced by the thought control, that if the person responds, none of their responses will hold any validity. Not for unsound arguments, but for attacking the person themselves. Ultimately, the whole thing is a fallacy known as failure to state. If you make enough attacks, ask enough questions, you won't ever have to state your position. In this case, the only real thing stated as fact is that he's right. If I agree, then it's because of the earlier flattery, and if I don't agree, then it's because of the earlier attacks. Very, very tricky, wouldn't you say? This is the first step, laying the groundwork, essentially baiting the trap. Let's see what the next step is. I spent the whole day with my daughter, so yeah, I focus on her quite a bit, actually. I'm not going to go on here and do a point-by-point refutation, because essentially the whole thing is an appeal to emotion. However, what I am looking to give my daughter is, if she had a question, the ability to say, I researched that, these are the answers I got, here's the problems I had with those answers, make your decision.
How funny. You have all these questions that you believe do not have logical answers, but yet you can't explain one simple thing. Answer the question. When a person loves, whose example is that person manifesting?
Needling in argumentum ad ridiculum. This is where someone insults the opposing side using ridicule. In this case, you can't explain one simple thing. This is also a case of revisionist history. You saw in the opening statement that there was a failure to state. Step by step, there was no statement of assertion of case. However, now that the part of the gigantic statement wasn't addressed, it's gone back to as the thesis statement in the opening statement as an unanswerable challenge. You can see this in the ministry where other religions are bashed, like Catholic Church, accusing them of everything from child molesting, being part of wars, greedy, and believing the false teachings of the Trinity. If the person addresses all the attacks but doesn't address the Trinity, revisionist history would go back and state that that is the most important part of their previous statement, creating a false victory. Interesting, wouldn't you say? When a person loves, he's not manifesting the quality of God as you state. The reason a person loves is that it is a mutually beneficial relationship, in that they will gain happiness from showing love and receiving the affection of the object of their bestowed affection. Once that love is snubbed and not reciprocated, that love goes away. Just because one verse says God is love does not make it so. As the saying goes, not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. This applies to God too. Now, this is not a textbook answer that's written in the Reasoning from the Scriptures book, is it? What JCAN 7 is doing here is something called leading questions. What leading questions attempt to do is continually cause a box around the person's argument, usually using something known as fallacy of division. Here it seems to be the intention JCANs wants me to either say that love is an instinct, so he can say, who do you think gave us that instinct? Humans are made in God's image. Or effectively, use of the God of the gaps. If I can't establish why love evolved for human beings, the fact is you don't know why love evolved. But I do. It's because God gave it to us when He created us in His image. Now that the answer given doesn't lead to the preset paths that JCAN 7 was thinking of, how do you think he'll react?
What gives you the desire to love your daughter? Give it a shot. On the form. You hug and kiss her, right? You want the best for her, right? You do feel that you love her and she loves you, right? If you can't explain this, then how are you going to be able to understand the answers to all your tough questions for Jehovah's Witnesses? Who taught us how to love? You express it every day. Why? You don't believe in God, remember? So why do you follow His example?
So, did you notice something here? Did JCAN 7's address my answer at all? No, not in the slightest. What he did here is something called argumentum ad nauseam, belaboring a point. Essentially repeating a point continuously as the argument even when it's already been addressed. Argument by question. Here JCAN 7's asked several questions in rapid succession. You hug and kiss her, right? You want the best for her, right? You feel your love for her and she loves you, right? The use of rapid questions, especially in a venue where the response will be limited, is a way to limit the refutation of later arguments, because there are so many questions to address in a limited space, whether it be a YouTube comment limitations of 500 characters, or in a debate where the time limit is short. Ad hominem, again, uses the same tactic as before. If you can't explain this, you can't understand the answers. Leading question, who taught us how to love? This is directly leading to the answer he's looking for, which is either an I don't know, which would be the scientific approach, so that God of the gaps argument can be used, or the instinct response, so he can again ask, well, who gave us that instinct? It must be God. Whenever someone comes to the multiple leading questions, one can almost guarantee they have a prepared response. In this case, one should check in the I don't believe in God section of the Reasoning from the Scriptures book. You can download a PDF of it online. As I mentioned quite a bit in other videos, love is a mutually beneficial relationship. It makes me feel good to see my daughter smile. It makes me happy to make her happy. In return, she shows the same affection to me because I make her feel good, and she knows to continue her feeling good, it's beneficial for her to make me feel good. No one taught us how to love. It's an instinctual trait for survival, especially as an infant. Essentially a restatement of the previous answer. Instead of going through and answering the rapid questions or falling for the leading question to lead to one of the answers that JCAN7 has prepared an answer for, how do you think they'll respond when both avenues are exhausted?
Hi Tim, you're keeping me from moving on to my next topic because you aren't answering the question. I didn't ask you to describe love, that's what you did. What I asked you was, or as you said in your own words, what makes a person have that instinct? Example, without jumping to another topic, no one has the desire to die. Why? As you said, instincts. I know you're knowledgeable, but is knowledge wisdom? The question is simple. Tim, there are some things that you can't find in Google.
Here is a pretty large admission. You're keeping me from moving on to the next topic. Essentially, he's saying here that he wasn't prepared for the answer given, and he can't move on to where he wants to control the conversation to go. Now, what is the next tactics? Moving the goalposts. I didn't ask you to describe love. What makes a person have that instinct? Here, the original question was, what gives you the desire to love your daughter? To which it was clearly answered with, it makes me feel good to see my daughter smile. It makes me happy to make her happy. So, now since the answer cannot lead to the conclusion he would like to draw, the goalposts are now moved from what gives you the desire now to what makes the person have that instinct. Straw man. This is where you create a position for an opponent and knock down that position which isn't the position of the opponent. In this case, as you said with your own words, what makes a person have that instinct? Since I wouldn't reach the conclusion he wanted, now he's just going to invent that I did take the position he wanted. This is in hopes that I'll defend the position he created for me so he can go to the topic he wants. It's not that I'm not answering your question. I'm not giving you the answer that you have in the Theocratic Ministry School book to overcome. The instinct to survive is what gives us the instinct of love. Survival is by both being the strongest and the fastest, but also having the most relationships to continue your survival. Through a millennia of evolution, it has become what is called love, which is simply mutual affection for a mutually beneficial goal. It all boils down to your survival.
Tim, you are funny. This is how you respond? This is your comeback? How can I teach you calculus when you're stuck in fractions? You left not because it didn't make sense, but because you got stuck. The system has you. You allowed it to take you, and now you're dragging your daughter with you. You're too deep in this. The more you defend what doesn't make sense, the deeper you both sink. It's not her fault. Come back to him. You know who Jehovah is.
Now, after pointing out that I could see the response he was trying to bring me to and knew where he was getting the responses, what did JCAN7 do? Argumentum ad ridicule. Here the phrase is like, Tim, you're funny. This is how you respond? This is your comeback? Are meant in sarcasm. It's meant to cast a negative light upon the previous statement of the opponent to make the observer think the previous statement is not valid. It would be the same if a politician gives a statement about their belief of a woman's right to choose and their opponent said, that's your answer? Appeal to false authority. Here, how can I teach you calculus when you're stuck in fractions? This is pointing to his own authority, that he knows something more complex than this opponent. So the observer of the comments will think that he's the one with authority instead of taking the actual comments at face value. Ad hominem. The same method used before, questioning motives, and in this case using emotional control, which is the E in the bite method of called mind control. Specifically, phobia indoctrination. Never a legitimate reason to leave. From the group's perspective, people who leave are weak, undisciplined, unspiritual, worldly, brainwashed by family, counselors, seduced by money, sex, drug, and rock and roll. It's actually a textbook example of emotional control, which finally leads to appeal to emotion. Here, you're dragging your daughter with you. It's not her fault. Trying to say that I'm killing my daughter by disagreeing with his arguments. This is simply a method to instill guilt into the opponent so they'll stop questioning the statements being made. Excessive use of guilt is another method of emotional control in the bite method of cult mind control. Specifically here, identity guilt. Who you are, not living up to your potential, your family, your past, your affiliations, your thoughts, feelings, or actions. Isn't it a bit strange that he seemingly went through every single one of these points nearly all at once? So, in other words, you're not going to address anything I said, and just give an appeal to fear and an accusation of the old standby, you're trapped in this system. Utterly pathetic. By your calculus metaphor, you mean that you have no response and you're trying to say something that's over my head, when your lack of response makes it clear I'm speaking way above you.